scan this QR code, and then you type in that password, and you'll be able to just post questions along the way in your Pigeonhole. This slide we will flash up again at the end of each session. Anyway, yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Kale. Today I'm going to share with you about basically Agile in practice and how Aquaria does Agile. So yeah, my name is Kale. I'm a senior digital consultant at Topan Aquaria. I'm actually a pretty new joinee. I joined in November of last year, so I guess about 8 months now that I've been with Topan. And actually, prior to I guess if you're talking about my career in IT, I started out in startups, and then after that, I spent about 5 to 6 years in government. So in a way, you can say I've been on both sides of the table, and I've kind of done Agile both in an in-house development team, as well as now currently on the, I guess you can call it the vendor side. So quite a bit of experience there, and hopefully we can share a bit more about that experience today across some of the different things that we have gone through while trying to do Agile. So I guess the big question that we kind of want to start with, right, is what does it mean to be Agile? It's easy to talk about, hey, we're going to do a software development, we're going to build this application using Agile, etc. But what does it actually mean when I say, hey, I work in an Agile team, we use Agile for this project? And maybe before we talk about what does it mean to be Agile, the other big question that we probably want to try and answer is, what is Agile? What exactly does it mean when we say Agile? So maybe to begin that, if I could get everyone's participation, if you could scan this QR code or go to menti.com and input in the 8 digits, maybe you can share a little bit about what your perspective of Agile is, and then yeah, we can go from there. Oh, a lot of words already. I see simple, timely, flexible, nimble, responsive, structured, efficient, thoughtful, fast. Quite a lot of interesting terms that are appearing. I guess a few ones that I'll pick out is words like change. Structured for me is a little bit newer. I sometimes would think that maybe Agile is a bit less structured and more flexible. But yeah. So that's like basically what we think the definition of Agile might be. And this is maybe what Atlassian, one of the big boys in the industry, Atlassian does the Jira and Confluence platforms. This is their very, very long, I guess, the dictionary definition of what Agile is. So if I read it out to you, right? Agile is an iterative approach to project management and software development that helps teams deliver value to their customers faster and with fewer headaches. Instead of betting everything on a big bang launch, an agile team works in small but consumable increments. Requirements, plans, and results are evaluated continuously, so teams have a natural mechanism for responding to change quickly. That's quite a mouthful and a very long definition, but I think most people would actually kind of zoom in on this last statement here, responding to change quickly, which we also saw some of you actually put into the word cloud earlier, talking about change, about being fast, about being able to respond very quickly. But I think maybe one common thing that a lot of bosses seem to think about Agile is that, hey, is it I can have unlimited changes? Is it like, hey, okay, Agile means I can keep reacting very quickly, I can keep doing a lot of different things until I basically reach my most ultimate product. But that is not always the case. At the end of the day, resources are limited, and Agile is a way to kind of help you kind of work through some of those limitations and achieve a better product. So maybe we can share a little bit more on how that actually happens. So this is the Agile Manifesto. This was created by a bunch of engineers in Silicon Valley quite some time ago. And there are 4 key themes that they actually talk about here. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools, working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. These are the 4 key themes of Agile. And maybe through some of the stories that I'll be sharing later, you get a little bit more sense of what these 4 teams actually mean for an agile team. So yeah, I'm going to share 3 stories first about agile development. Some of them happened in some of my previous working experiences, some of them a bit more recent. And some of them are not actually software development, but you can kind of see the agile values kind of come out within the stories themselves. So the first one is about this company called Hyperpanda. So this was a more recent occurrence when we were back in Saudi a couple of weeks ago together with Celine and the rest of the team. So Hyperpanda is kind of like NTUC Fair Price of Saudi. They are a very big supermarket chain, and you'll see them in a lot of places throughout the country. And this was where we kind of encountered one situation, and we kind of had a good laugh about it. So maybe to start off the story, is to share a little bit more about this very typical waterfall kind of development cycle that most people are familiar with. When we are developing a product or system today, generally you start with gathering requirements, designing, then you develop it, you test it, then you eventually deploy it. And this is pretty much the same kind of cycle that you go through any of the other projects or developments in life. So for Hyperpanda, they wanted to put up a new wallpaper in one of their venues. So of course, the first thing they did was, okay, let me set up a vendor brief and push it out. Then basically what I want to tell the vendor is, hey, let's print a wallpaper to tell customers to visit our website, because now we're going to do online orders and online delivery. So they typed it out and then they sent it out to the vendor. But unfortunately, they didn't notice one very major typo inside the brief. They actually spelled website wrongly with an extra A, WEBSAITE. So there was an error there, but they already sent it out to the vendor anyway, and the vendor just happily printed it, stuck up the new wallpaper on the wall, and everyone was like fine and dandy until maybe the boss came down, visited, and it's like, hey, how come there's a problem there? Go and fix it. So of course the guy says, oh, okay, there's a problem. Let me call my vendor, and tells the vendor, hey, can you remove the A? There's this extra A there. Then the vendor says, A, it's going to be very expensive to change the whole wallpaper. And he quoted the price, and then the manager, of course, says, hey, I don't have budget for that. How about you just help me try and patch over it or something like that. So okay, the vendor says okay. So the manager sends over a very clear instruction. Please remove the A after the S. And then the vendor decides, okay, let me do that. So happily, he decided to stick a white piece of paper over the first A on website. But because he said remove the A after the S, the worker also decided, okay, let me color away the A at the end in the URL. Then of course, now a bunch of us came into the supermarket, we looked at this sign and then we asked, how exactly did this happen? Like, how is it through this entire chain of all the different people working on this wallpaper, did they end up making 2 different mistakes with just this one simple slogan, right? So we asked, what if? We asked the Marvel timeline, right? What if different things had changed or different decisions were made, and what would the result be? So what if the customer, what if the other staff in the company checked the requirements before they were sent out to the vendor? Maybe there was a second pair of eyes to look over the brief, fix it. That's one possibility. What if the vendor noticed the typo and decided, hey, maybe before I print the wallpaper, let me double check. Is everything there correct? This looks a bit weird. But also that didn't happen. What if the vendor double confirmed the fix? Oh, are you sure you want me to remove both A's? Oh, no, I just want to remove the first A. That could have been another possibility. Along the way, many things could have happened. But I think the 2 key themes that we kind of pull out of this is the first one is really about product ownership. And the second one is really about communication. So what I mean by these 2 teams is that across this entire team of people, whether it was the vendor, the printer, the person labeling or sticking up the wallpaper, or the different managers involved in this project in the supermarket, if they all had shared ownership, which I mean basically they share both the responsibility of the success of this project, then maybe along the way, anyone in time, rather than thinking, oh, okay, the text is the manager's job, oh, the printing is the vendor's job. If anyone in point in time, rather than think about who has which responsibility, and instead sharing ownership over the success of this project, then maybe more people would be willing to speak up. And in terms of speaking up, that's also the second point, which is about open, transparent, and regular communication across all members of the team. So if everyone was constantly updating each other, letting each other know what was the progress and what they're actually doing, then that may have also helped. Where, hey, along the way, someone would have brought up the typo, and we could have headed off this error earlier. So which brings me to my second story. This one, I'm calling it the Mobile Unfriendly API. So this was also from a past project. So, okay, so this story happened with a government project. I'll just call them Agency X. So Agency X decides one day, hey, I'm going to build this project. So the CE or the boss just decides, hey, I'm going to build this project. And then the bunch of the managers from the business unit start together over the next 3 to 6 months, where they start doing a lot of like ideations and all that, coming up with this list of features that they want to build. And all of these features start to get compiled into a nice, thick tender specifications document, like a 30 megabyte file that you push out to GBiz, and eventually you award a vendor. And the vendor says, okay, X amount of dollars, I'm going to do this project for you. And because it's a more traditional kind of development model, they took about 9 months, they delivered the project. And of course, not everything's going to be perfect. When you develop this project, there's bound to be problems. There's no such thing as a perfect software right out of the box from day one, right? So one of the particular features in this system was actually an API that was meant to be consumed by a mobile application. So it would download a list of items, and with each item, there would be a link to an image that they would load. So they were expecting to, hey, I'm going to pull out my mobile app, I'm going to scroll through this list, and all these pictures are going to load very prettily on the mobile app. But unfortunately, the reality of the situation was that when they built the content management system, there were no clear validations put in place because they wanted to encourage the users to upload the highest resolution images possible. And this resulted in a very mixed bunch of pictures. Some pictures were like 150 kilobytes. Some pictures were a whopping 100 megabytes. And when you have 100 megabyte pictures appearing in that feed, what happens is the reality of the situation is instead of scrolling through a nice series of pictures, most of the time you see this loading spinner, it's laggy, and the overall experience is bad. So so the management started to notice this problem as more and more pictures will start being uploaded into the system as they gain more users. And then they say, hey, we have a major event or showcase upcoming at the end of the month. Can you fix it by then? So, okay, happily the manager goes to the vendor and says, hey, can you fix it by then? And then the manager quotes, okay, this is how much it's going to cost. You need to submit a change request, and this is how much time it's going to take. So by the time the paperwork is done, by the time the thing is approved and they actually finish the enhancement, it's almost 2 months away. So of course, this is not going to happen for the in time for the showcase. So what would Agency X do, right? Fortunately, the team building the mobile application was not the same team that was building the backend APIs. It was actually an in-house agile team using a co-development resource. And for them, because they were agile, they were able to change some of the work that they were doing. So initially they had a roadmap. They were going to build like feature A, feature B, feature C, etc. Right? And then along the way, they decided, hey, the showcase is upcoming. We don't need feature C for the showcase. It's not as important. However, we really, really need to fix this major issue because it's affecting all our users. It's affecting the user experience. So seeing there was like maybe one sprint to go, they just decided, hey, let's just swap it out. Let's just do this other feature first. Then, okay, they worked on that. Even though the initial timeline was to finish feature C by this month, they decided, hey, it's okay, we are flexible about this. Let's fix the image downloads issue instead. So one of the full stack developers said, okay, it's okay. I can do a script and I'll resize all the pictures and the mobile app will call my system whenever it sees the same URL. So it was a very seamless switch to basically load the images from a different resource. And the end result was a successful showcase and a successful mobile application. So I guess the moral of the story here, for at least the Agile team, was that it is more important to have 3 very good features versus having this whole catalog of like list of features that are just completed. Rather than just completing this whole full to-do list of all these features, let's just focus on getting the ones that are important and get them done right. And Bruce Lee has a very useful saying here, which is be water, my friend. So you want to have that flexible mindset to understand what your objectives are. And in software development or in product development, reprioritizing your tasks that have greater business value is inherently more important because at the end of the day, you want your customer, you want your user to have a good experience with your product. Then they'll come back, they'll ask other people to use the product, etc. You'll get less complaints overall. So having that one product achieve the 3 most important features and do those 3 features very well, having that quality is more important than having a list of 10 subpar features that you finish. So being flexible with your requirements is important. Which comes to my third story. The third story is kind of like a collection of experiences that an agile, if you see the quotation marks, had working in one of the agencies. So the first one is, I think I'm quite familiar with a lot of people. When they say agile, then you start to think, okay, I'm going to do like sprint planning, I'm going to do sprint retrospectives, I'm going to do stand-ups every day, etc. I'm going to do my backlog grooming, refining sessions, etc. And they start to book a lot of meeting time slots. And some of the meeting time slots are crazy. You're doing like 1 hour, 2 hour stand-ups meetings every day. It starts to become like a project management catch-up meeting every single day. And this takes up a lot of time. And you end up with this overly populated calendar where a lot of the development teams stop having the sufficient time to get the work done. So as much as Agile is really about good communication, it's also about communication at the right time. Like we keep certain meetings short, like stand-up should be 5 to 15 minutes. That's why you call it stand-ups. And you also want to be able to give time for the team to work. The second important thing here is that through all these meetings that you book, you also want to make sure that the communication is, I would say, relevant. So it cannot just be, for example, in this scenario, right, we are doing a sprint retrospective and you have the two bosses just simply talking to each other. And most of the team, as you can tell, they're kind of unhappy. There are probably problems that they're facing or issues with the process, but no one is actually bringing it up to the bosses because maybe they're afraid. They're afraid that they'll be marked for being wrong. They'll be afraid of certain issues or blockers that they might be facing. And because they're not really openly speaking about it, then the processes never actually get fixed. And a lot of people remain unhappy. And eventually all of this leads to the product still being not as good. The third one is really about paperwork. So this is also another common occurrence that we have also seen in some of our Agile projects where at the end of the day, we say, hey, okay, this project was done in Agile. And then, AGO audit comes or some other audit comes and they say, okay, I need you to prove to me now that you did all your stand-ups. Do you have meeting notes for every single stand-up you did for the last 12 months? For an Agile team, we also talk a lot about having customer collaboration over comprehensive documentation, and which is something that we encourage. Rather than focusing on a large amount of paperwork to prove of all these, if you're actually doing the process right, then you can also get past this. So what we also recommend is putting aside the classic old school project management documents, putting aside all of your Excel spreadsheets and all that have to be maintained over this course of the project, and focusing on what we call living documents and progressive documents. So when we use Jira, Confluence, and similar tools effectively, we get this progressive build up of the documentation over time. As requirements come in, we work on the user stories, we refine them. All of these become documents that can later be reviewed by whether it's an auditor or management. They can all review the velocity and the progress that the team is going through without having to generate a lot of standalone documents just for meeting minutes and such. The conclusion for actually all of these, I guess, observations is really about the mindset and the culture of the team. So when we talk about Agile, it's really about this change in mindset and culture. We're not just adopting a new way of working where, okay, let's just have 5 stand-ups a week. Let's do 10 stand-ups and 1 sprint planning and 1 retrospective every 2 weeks. It's not just about the meetings. It's not just about the processes and going through the processes like go through motion. We want to actually change the mindset of the team and the work culture of the team so that everyone basically changes how they communicate with each other and changes basically how they maybe work together as well. So not just adopting the new processes, but changing the mindset of the people involved, from the bosses all the way down to the developers, and not just like following the buzzwords and say, hey, we're doing stand-up today, but actually adopting this new work culture where maybe stand-ups, we really try to time box it to 5 to 15 minutes and have the discussions done at appropriate times and keeping the communications channels open, whether regardless of like the hierarchy, whether you're the boss, you're the director, or you're the manager, etc. So I guess it comes down to the most important point, which is for agencies today, how do we get started, right? The first model to get started, which is what Celine mentioned earlier about the co-development. So co-development is one way where you can quickly get an in-house team set up and running within your own agency. So basically you can get an agile tribe, developers, QA, Scrum Master, UX designer, etc. Get them together. And with this resource, it's the easiest way to start to manage a project because you really don't have to focus on the scope. scope is something that it can be figured out along the way as you're working out through the project timeline. The other way is a bit more traditional, or maybe a change in how we're doing the traditional project tenders, where maybe you start to focus more on the user stories instead. So it's focused more on the objectives rather than just a bucket list of features. And keeping some things optional, whereby it's done maybe calculated based on user story points, also gives you that flexibility to be able to say along the way, hey, like for example, the image download API, right? I want to say, okay, I have an important timeline. I'm going to drop 2 user stories and says, I want you to fix this image download instead. So these are things that you can do when you keep some of these options open. And maybe now to share a little bit more about how Aquaria also did, that's our sprints. Typically, if you work with us on an Agile project, we would start off with a basic training. We want to make sure that all our clients with our product owners are well versed with Agile and the Scrum processes. And we also want to help you start to change and instill that new mindset and culture while working together with our customers. So we usually start off with a workshop, and this leads to what we call a sprint zero. And in this inception sprint, this is where we tend to start to figure out and work together on the product vision, the product goal, work on the first set of key user stories, and really start to flesh out some of those details, as well as the overall design of the project. And we start to get into the iterative cycle of doing both the development and the testing. So as each sprint turns out one, I guess you can call it one iteration or one shippable product, the QA is also starting to do all their test cases and testing. And along the way, we are also still working with our clients to continue to refine the user stories together. And as we get feedback along the way, or we're working on the future user stories, we're constantly refining the user stories. And eventually, this will lead us to the milestones, which we call release sprints, where we really focus on things like your VAPT and all that, doing your security fixes. And eventually, you'll launch your product. And of course, generally, you expect this to be the MVP, and there will be multiple releases after this as well. So, all in, we have a good process that we call Agile 2 that we can work together with you on. And the last part, of course, is really just to remind everyone that in Agile, the product owner is a very key role, and the product owner typically comes from the agency side, and there is an expectation of time commitment as well as for the product owner to be present. The product owner to be present and available for meetings, to make key decisions, to clarify requirements along the way, especially when there's an issue and then the Scrum Master comes to you and asks you questions, etc., or anyone else in the team. Having that open communication channel and that feedback cycle is very essential for Agile to create a successful product overall. So with that, I guess it kind of answers the question of what does it mean to be Agile. Shared ownership of the product, regular and open communication, reprioritize tasks with greater business value, not just adopting new processes, but a change in mindset, and at the end of the day, building a new work culture, not just for the vendor team, but together with our business units. So with that, do come build with us, and you can speak to any of us about co-development or about Agile projects, and we'll be happy to share more. If you have any questions, you can scan the QR code and just put it into the pigeonhole, then, or feel free to just raise your hand. We can pass the mic to you as well.
Keo, for the insights on Agile. Yes, time for some questions. If there are any questions from the floor, you can raise your hand. I think I see some questions on the pigeonhole as well. Tough questions. So, okay, I'm going to answer the questions. Any from the floor? Maybe you can take up some of the questions.
Yeah, I think Daryl asked, how do we spec for Agile projects if requirements are likely to change more significantly and frequently than waterfall development? So I think that was the two ideas that we brought up. One possibility was actually to keep some things optional, so there is some variation if you need to be able to do changes along the way. Basically, you're packaging some of these change requests at the start into the tender already, and keeping some of the features maybe a bit more optional. The other way really is really just the co-development model. So I think you also asked a question on how to reduce manpower costs for agile projects, especially if the system and budget is small. Um, it really depends. It depends on what system you're building. If you only have budget for one full stack and one PM, then I imagine, I mean, at the end of the day, it's scope, timeline, or cost, right? So if cost is the limiting factor, then we can expect timeline to be longer. But in Agile, we also expect to be able to push out MVPs along the way. So you're not expecting one big bang release after 2 years, but multiple iterative releases over time as well. So if budget is a limiting factor, then maybe that's what you have to work within.
And on the other thing you can consider is agile project scope determined by the user story point. So as part of the the scope of the project, you could ask for certain additional user story points to be implemented, and then you can potentially give some flexibility need to implement additional features. So you can quickly do that out of the user story point that could be one possible consideration. Question: How do you ensure you have enough budget? How do you ensure you have enough budget? Seems it's so dynamic. Tough one. Again, I'm glad I'm not the hot seat.
I think it's the same concept. Rather than think about the total budget, think about maybe the first phase. I don't know, maybe if your budget is limited to enough for 3 to 6 months of development, the agile team, then think about pushing it out with that first phase of 3 to 6 months of development, and maybe that success of that MVP creates the justification for additional budget for the next phase. But yeah, otherwise this is a difficult question to answer. How does using COTS products work with Agile, commercial off the shelf? I don't think this is actually, I think maybe to think about Agile in terms of the mindset of the team working on the product. So if I was a team, let's say I'm using Jira to build service desk with IT ticketing, support system, etc. The team works in an agile fashion where there are sprints, there are cycles, and maybe you even have developers from Atlassian supporting you or from a company supporting you. But it's how we run the project and how we actually communicate within the project that's more important rather than the actual products that we're using. I think that would make a bit more sense.
Question: Is agile really suitable for all projects?
Okay, so I think for Agile being suitable for all projects, maybe there are projects that you would think doesn't fit into the Scrum model. Scrum is one of the more popular frameworks when we're talking about software development, right? But for, let's say, for example, the supermarket model, it's less about doing work in sprints, but more about keeping to the values that an agile team brings. So it could be that the supermarket is just simply using like a Kanban board to keep track, for the management to know what some of the staff are doing. And then from there, they can already keep the communication channels open and be able to point out things like the mistake with the typo, etc. So it doesn't necessarily always mean that you cannot use Agile. It's just how you decide to build that work culture with your team.
It's a simple question. Agile applicable only to agile applicable only in code development and testing. Or can you adopt it in the entire project?
I would say yes. I think you can adopt it in most scenarios. So it's really about changing the perspective. And I think the most important key idea of Agile is that flexibility. So not everyone will have the same set of processes when we talk about Agile or Scrum. You can tweak the processes to what works best for your team or what works best for your project. So along the way, when we do our retrospectives and we are giving that feedback cycle about the product, it's not just about the product, but also about improving some of the processes involved. So along that way, you can kind of create a work culture that may be unique to your team and your project.
Agile be applied to maintenance project?
I would think yes. I guess my key answer to this is usually yes. But yeah, again, it really depends on the nature of the project and what kind of requirements comes in and how you really want to build that working relationship with the staff, the team that's maintaining your work as well.
Let's give this one. All the drawings inside does it represent you?
Some of the drawings, yes. So these were drawn by our UX designer, and then yeah, she basically cloned me somehow.
Does Agile always mean faster delivery compared to say
Wow.
waterfall?
This is like a shotgun question, but no, it's not always. It's not necessarily always faster. That might be one of the misconceptions of Agile, but maybe you can think of it a different way. The MVP is delivered earlier, but it's not going to have all the features that you might be thinking about for this whole entire project. But what we are trying to aim for is also higher quality product at the end of the day. So we want to push out some of the features as early as possible to start collecting that feedback earlier so we can continue the enhancement cycle.
Cost. How do we reduce the manpower cost for Agile project?
Wow.
Especially the budget is small. When you just do it like with the waterfall, it will be one PM, one developer. Agile may end up maybe more.
So I think again, like we mentioned earlier, it's if the team is small, then maybe we can aim for smaller releases over time. But the main concept is still to develop over time and get that feedback cycle over time, and then eventually you will end up with the good product. So if the requirement is to start with a small team, it's not necessary that you can't do it, but you just have to work within those limitations.
There's a question on we have a copy of the Agile presentation, like multiple information, we have recording all this. So after this whole seminar, we will post all the videos on our YouTube channel, so you will be able to get access to all that. Okay, you mean you have not been able to hear me all this while? No? It seems I can hear myself. Yeah, okay. Wait a minute. What are the documentation tools you use to build up the project documents?
Okay, so personally for myself, we were in the previous projects, we focused a lot on Jira and Confluence. So Jira has the Kanban board with all the tasks, subtasks, etc. And for tasks, we don't just assign to just the developers or the QA. We assign to everybody across the board. Sometimes including to the infra side, you can just push out a task to the infra side and says, hey, I need a new whatever you need. So all of the tasks are tracked, and it's a very easy way to track exactly everything that was the full progress of the project. And if each task, you can link it to a fuller page on Confluence where we retain not just the user stories and all the requirements in detail, including some of the UI designs, but also any of the discussions made. So for example, you get commentary from bosses, etc. These are all also captured within the Confluence documents. So in a way, it's like a living meeting, notes of meetings within Confluence itself, tagged to each of these user stories. So again, I don't think there's a very prescriptive way of doing this. It's also about what works for your team and what works for your organization. But you can kind of start to explore the tools and see what makes the most sense for your team as well.
Okay, many of our customers subscribe to ship heads. So in those instances, then we use Jira on most of it. But for some of the other projects, some customers may not want to use ship heads. So in that case, we will discuss. We do have other alternative tools that we can discuss with you on what is the suitable ones. Okay, I think this is one last one. Where did that go? Oops. I think sorry, I was scanning through the questions because there are quite a number of questions. Okay, does Agile work in an environment where people draw lines? With a fixed mindset and not taking ownership?
That's the change in mindset.
Okay, no, I'm glad I'm not the hot seat. Yeah.
That's the change in mindset. I think that's also why we recommend that all the key stakeholders, especially the product owners, like our directors and all that, do come for some of these workshops so that we can also encourage them on what the best practices are for the product owner specifically. So I think one thing that we have tried that we felt makes sense is getting them to be very aware of what are the issues when you, I mean, we have limited resources. We can't do everything perfectly. If you tell me to do this within one day and it's not possible, then Agile's not going to magically make it happen in one day. So it's also about knowing some of these risks and limitations and being able to work openly together with the team for the better success of the product.
Okay, so what's a competent agile, say, project manager? I suppose agile Scrum Master. What the
Hard and soft skills, right?
soft skills, yeah, that required for this
think
role.
usually for Scrum Masters, they call them servant leaders. So you're expecting someone who has good interpersonal skills and able to work not just with the team, but also to be able to kind of unblock some of the issues. And actually, typically, the number one blocker in most projects is not really like technical issues, but people issues. You have to go and like chamshong with some people to, hey, help me do this faster a bit, etc. Scrum Masters tend to be good at that. So you tend to look out for people with good interpersonal skills.
Mm. Okay, I'm trying to read this question. So, maintenance project involves 24/7 working mode. So any issue can come up anytime, and some may be SAF1 issues. So how do you prioritize this task in this case?
I think this one is a little bit of a different kind of question.
Yeah.
So I think if it's SAF1, then the priority is kind of there already lah. So for 24/7, I imagine they have to work on the SAF1 issues. But this also means that, let's say, if the developers are fixing the SAF1 issues, then you can imagine some of the day-to-day tasks that they were supposed to be doing, if there were no issues, might get naturally pushed back. And I think the key important factor here maybe is for the product owner to realize that, hey, actually my timeline for this feature is not going to happen. It's going to happen maybe 1 week later because we were busy fixing the SAF1 bugs. That might also be one of the scenarios.
Okay, that's really a lot of questions. If you do have questions, I think you can catch Kale during the break. So I will just take one last question before we start the break. Yeah. Can you elaborate on making some items optional to cater for variations? I think this is what you raised
Yes.
during your presentation
Yes.
just now. Yeah.
Well, okay, so this is actually a tough question because not all project tenders are done the same way, right? But for example, when we keep certain items optional, what we're trying to focus on is you quantify by a key user story that maybe focuses on the objective rather than a specific feature. So rather than I say, hey, can you build an exact, I don't know, sign in with social media or something like that, but you write it in a way that talks about what the user wants to achieve. Like you want the user to be able to easily use their existing platforms to log into the system. Then this kind of leaves it more open, first of all, more open for the project team to come up with what's a feature that can achieve this objective. So there's more flexibility in how you achieve the requirement. That's the first layer. The second layer would be what Celine mentioned also, which is the user story points. So having some optional items or a bucket of user story points that you can utilize. So let's say this bucket of items is worth about 16 or 20 points or something like that. Then that can be easily traded up for 20 points of something else if you need that, if you need to exercise the option. So yeah, in a way you're trying to achieve by maybe for the high levels features, you have no choice because I mean it's part of the project scope, right? You have to build those features no matter what. But there are some other less important items that you don't have to write so detailedly, so it doesn't become this A to Z catalog that the vendor has to complete everything. But there will be items that are kept optional, so you can be flexible about it.
All right. Thank you very much, Kale. Let's give him a round of applause. Okay, now it's time for break. You can have the refreshments are just outside. I would suggest that we take about 20 minutes break or so. So we come back around say Now 10:55. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you very much.